You know, it's very easy to say just accept and move on. Unfortunately, that never happens. Number one. Number two, let us just wind back to the point where he began. For all his claimed greatness, Jawaharlal Nehru was perhaps the most deracinated leader this country has ever had the misfortune of having. He never could fathom the soul of India, and that is where Gandhi scored over him. Gandhiji realized that the soul of India is deeply spiritual, it is deeply rooted to the soil. And that brought about these distortions in governance, and ultimately those distortions percolate down to academics, the history writing project. Why would I just give a pass to the manner in which history was written and not scrutinize it to expose those who were behind, or the thought processes that were behind the writing of that particularly blotted, concocted history? It's very easy to say that, we have to accept and move on. Why? Why is it that a road in Lutyens, Delhi should have been named after Aurangzeb? Why is it, Pawan just mentioned, the sacking of Nalanda? Why is it that we still have a railway station and a town named after Bakhtiyar? Why is it that I am expected to grin and bear it? Now, these are questions which the multitudes now have begun to ask, and there are no convincing replies. You can't just say, I will not change the name of Bakhtiyarpur because that is going to hurt sentiments. My big fat toe. Here was a man who sacked perhaps the world's oldest library, and definitely the world's largest library of that time. And that sacking was preceded by a very particularly brutal massacre. And yet we are reluctant to accept. If you accept, then change. If you don't change, then that means you neither accept nor are you willing to concede that you were wrong. No, but my contention is slightly more than that. When you talk about looking for something as simple as inspirational Indians, why is it that the dispensation which India has had till now never tried to make someone like Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar into an inspirational figure? Because he was a Sanskrit teacher. But look at his social achievements. He is the man who got widow remarriage legalized in this country. He is the man who introduced formal education for women and girls in this country. Now we were never told this story. How many beyond Bengal are aware of these stories? And it's a long list. I just gave you one example.
Or Netaji Subhash.
Or Netaji Subhash. We just heard someone begin at the previous session said, I would like to begin with prayers to Netaji. I thought, wow, I mean, that's very impressive. He meant Mulayam Singh Yadav, but today is the day. How many of you in the audience are aware that today, on this day in 1943, Subhash Chandra Bose declared the formation of the provisional government of Azad Hind? Hands up, please. How many of you are actually aware of this fact? See, you have your answer. And when this happens, there is deracination becomes a fashion statement. It becomes a way of life. And this great hoax of Western modernization then becomes the substitute. And that is something which we must agitate against. And I personally feel media can play an effective role. And I'm glad that on two recent instances, media played quite an effective role. One on the very stupid debate on whether the lions of the new lion capital atop the new parliament building, whether they look fierce, whether they look angry. Yeah. Excuse me? And the other one was when they finally got around to dropping "Abide by Me" from the beating retreat. And the chest beating that happened, as if India's fundamental character, fundamental identity was getting despoiled. It was getting destroyed by dropping that hymn. So that is the extent of colonization of the Indian mind. And lastly, although not really connected, but let us also not over glorify media as it existed. I think Arnab does a far more fierce and fearless job than many other editors did when we were growing up. I was in high school when emergency happened, 1975-77. And there is this great myth that the media and the press fought against it, which is just not true. Every newspaper crumbled. Ultimately, even Indian Express crumbled. There are these myths that newspapers carried black boxes as editorials. One newspaper, Indian Express, carried it, and after that, the emergency regime came down so strongly that even they crumbled, which led to L.K. Advani's famous comment as INB minister after the emergency, that he said that when asked to bend, you chose to crawl. So hopefully that era is over, and media today is way more independent. It is definitely more conscious to news consumers, what they want. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, after all, you are producing news for consumption. And so long as the demand is not for pornographic or salacious content, if it is for good content, which resonates with your viewer, with your reader, you should do it. That should be the way forward towards creating a truly Indian narrative.
You mentioned the emergence